Good morning, everyone. Today we have Byron McFarland with us. Byron is an exit and equity compensation strategist. He is the author of instructional documents, a sought-after speaker, and a former Marine. His passion is revealing to small businesses how they can compete and win for the war in talent with their larger company rivals, which is what he's going to be sharing with us today. In this webinar, Byron will share how his clients have used performance equity to attract, reward, and retain top talent. With this, he'll also uncover the power of using your business value to align your financial interests with your leadership team, and in turn, using the appreciation and value to effectively pay the cost of performance equity awards. One last reminder, this is an interactive session. We want to hear from you. So if you look at the bottom of the screen, you'll see a chat button and a Q&A button. We encourage you to use those throughout the entire time, anytime you have a question or comment for Byron. And I'm going to go ahead and pass it off and get started.
Great. Well, thank you very much for that introduction. Welcome, everybody. And my objective today is to reveal to you some of the secrets we're using to help our clients compete effectively with their larger private company or public company rivals. And so as a fan of the whiteboard, I have put up all of my transferable concepts to help you understand more of what I say by drawing it up on the board and using examples. And I encourage you to ask questions as you have them. I'm happy to answer them along the way because chances are I will be talking about it, and I want to make sure that you get the point for that. So first thing is we've got this problem, and this problem is we've got these three fronts that are attacking our talent in small business. And that the first of those fronts is self-employment. I don't know if you knew this or not, but the Small Business Administration recorded over 5 million, about 5.5 million new business starts in 2021, which was up over 50% of the average over the last 10 years. So there's a tremendous amount of interest in self-employment. The second is the free market, is that with the work from home and the social media, everyone is able to be approached by recruiters, friends, colleagues, etc., to be invited in to join different companies. And since you can work from home or work from anywhere in many cases, they've made it a lot easier for people to be mobile in their employment. And then the third is expectations. And the expectations come from the individuals who are working for the Russell 5000 is the 5,000 small companies that are public in the United States, and 70% of those companies offer ownership or some form of equity to their staff in order to retain them. So now it's been my experience that businesses that are dealing with this, their line of defense against that for self-employment and all that is basically as benefits. So 401k with the match, health insurance, group life insurance, long-term disability, things of that nature. For the free market, the answer that I most commonly hear, how do you compete there, is we have a really good culture. We allow for people to work from home if they want. We have flexible work schedules. We have core values. We have purpose statement. We work really hard on our culture. And then the third, on expectations of ownership, what I most commonly hear is, well, we pay people a bonus, so that ought to keep them. But the majority of the bonuses that we see that small employers are paying are paid at the end of the year or the end of the business cycle, whatever that is. And then they start over again. So there's no real stickiness in that. So what we like to do is we like to build a moat around your talent here by tying it to your business value. And this over here represents the value of your business. And we're suggesting that you can share a piece of that value with your leadership team. Now, the most common valuation methodology that we see is cash flow, which is represented by earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization, that is both sustainable meaning that it's not being attacked by a large competitor or isn't subject to regulatory changes. And then is ultimately transferable, meaning that it's not all reliant on the owner. So the cash flow that is available, the EBITDA times the multiplier equals the business value. So this is the business value here. And we're suggesting that to build a moat around your talent pool here, you share a piece of this business value. And the way that you go about sharing it is you create some form of pool like that. And so when we look at the value of a business, for example, in this particular case, what we're going to do is we're going to say that this business here that's sharing a piece of its equity is valued at 6 times trailing 12 months profit. And let's say that we started off here, the current value was at $1 million of profit. So if we took that times 6, then the value would be 6 million. So this value of this business right here is $6 million. If the profit goes to 1.5 million times 6, then it's 9 million. So we have some appreciation in the value of the business. And if it goes to 2 million, then the value is 12 million. So now we have further appreciation in that business. So now if we were going to share a piece of that business pie with management, we have 2 different ways that we can do that. And they are full value and growth in value. Full value means that they share in the overall value of the business. So from 0 out to wherever it currently is. And growth in value is that it participates in these outer rings as the business grows in value, they participate in that. There's 2 types of full value equity plans for small business owners. The first is restricted stock, which are actual shares of ownership in the company where you're on the cap table as an actual shareholder. And the second would be phantom stock. And the difference between restricted stock and phantom stock is on phantom stock, I have a piece of the business value, but it comes to me in the form of compensation, as opposed to up here, it comes to me in the form of a capital asset. Then we have on the growth value side, we have 2 types of growth value. We have options, and stock options are ways for employees to have an opportunity to buy into the company contractually based upon the purchase price that was set whenever they allocated the option to them. And the second one is stock appreciation right. And a stock appreciation right allows the participant to enjoy the appreciation of the company. So let's look at these 2 here, the restricted stock and phantom stock, and say this right here represents these 2 here. So the total value that was shared, they get a piece of that full value in the company. And here in the options in the SAR is picking up the appreciation in the value of the company, which would be this stuff right here. Kind of the crust, so to speak, of the pie. Now, if we were to convert either one of these types of equity into a number down here in the equity pool, and say over here we got a full value and a growth in value, and we use these numbers here, if we shared this potential case, let's say it was 10%, so we shared 10% of the value with the management team on the full value. If the value was 6 million, then the management team would have $600,000 in value in their account. Now, that would be subject to a vesting schedule or some form of forfeiture. It wouldn't be an outright award, but it would be, that's how we would calculate their value. But if you said the growth in value, we started out at 6 million in value and we issued 10% of the company in growth, there'd be no value at the 6 million because that's where we issued the units and there had yet to be any value created. But once we go to this appreciation, now we got 900,000 in full value. And now we're dealing with the spread between 6 million and 9 million. 9 minus 6 equals 3. 3 million times 10% is $300,000. So the stock appreciation right or option holder would have an account balance of roughly $300,000. At the 12 million, we got 1.2 million in full value for the restricted stock or phantom stockholders. And we got the spread between 6 million and 12 million. 6 million times 10% is $600,000. So as you can see, there's a lot more value available to the management team in the full value award as opposed to the stock appreciation right or the stock option award. And the stock option and the stock appreciation right award, they only get to participate when the growth in value occurs in the company. So the advantage of the full value is they get to participate in the total value, and the full value would be far more valuable to an individual. So when do people usually use full value versus partial value? Well, it goes over here. It depends on the relationship that the person has with the company. And we use the relationship paradigm, which is the relationship between two people that are in some form of intimate personal relationship. Goes from we're dating to we really get serious about each other, we get engaged, and then ultimately we set a date and we follow through on the date, we get married. So the business relationship for date, engage, and marry would be compensation wise. Dating, we consider dating a bonus in that we're going to pay this bonus at the end of some period, and then we're going to start the cycle all over again. Much like dating, we may be getting together on Thursday or Friday nights, but maybe we're not regular yet. On the engaged side, then we move into phantom stock and stock appreciation rights, because we're committed to each other, but I haven't necessarily created a legal obligation to share everything with you that I have with a shareholder. For example, if you're an outright shareholder, then you have certain rights. If you're a phantom shareholder or stock appreciation right holder, you don't have those rights because you're receiving those awards through compensation. And then if we're going to get married, the highest expression would be restricted stock, and then stock options, which are exercisable into restricted stock. So that means now that I'm creating a contractual relationship with you, either A, we are partners, we are business married, or B, I'm giving you the option to become a partner and to buy into my company. And the option would be issued at some price back here, and the value that you get ultimately would be convertible into buying restricted stock. So the two different types of equity classes, full value and growth in value, are then converted over here into how do you choose one from the other. And typically the question that we ask our clients is, are you willing to get business married to this person? And that means up here that one, I'm willing to, we're all committed, and two, we have some expectations of each other. And the further I go out on the expectations, for example, if I'm owner in a company it would be expected if the business needed money that then I would have to contribute some proportionate to my ownership interest. Back here on the engaged side, if the business needs money, there's no expectation that the phantom shareholder or the stock appreciation right holder would contribute capital to support the business. So that's the meaningful difference between those two types of equities. So then we like to use psychology in the plan design, and the majority of the people we're dealing with are working with the phantom stock or the restricted stock or the stock appreciation rights. They're trying to figure out what it is that we can do when we're awarding these things to motivate people's behavior. And so there's this theory out there called the motivational force formula. And actually the theory was Victor Vroom's the expectancy theory, which was done back in the early 60s. And it really was designed to predict under what conditions would a person be motivated to do something, to change their behavior. And so we apply that to our equity-based incentive plans, and that the first variable in this motivational force formula is—
Hey, Byron, we have a quick question.
Yeah.
Sorry, I wanted to pause you before you started. Michelle said, I missed how much the original 10% was calculated. Was that just a decision on how much stock was available to employees, or was the 10% calculated?
Oh, I'm just using it as an example. Right? Was that the question?
Yep.
Was how did I arrive at 10%?
Yep, perfect.
Yeah, I just use it by way of example to say that we've created a pool, and that pool is allocated to be available to management. We don't necessarily have to award it all, but we've set it aside and said it's available for management. And then there would be either a compensation committee and the board that would help determine who would be eligible to participate in the pool, or the owner, if it was a sole owner or one majority owner, then they would be probably representing the compensation committee and working with an advisor or their HR team to decide who should participate. But that pool would be usually as a percentage of the total value, so that it's always capped. We're not going to exceed this percentage unintentionally. So that's the outcome that you're usually trying to prevent, is have more equity allocated than you thought. Did that answer the question?
I think so. That sounds perfect. Thank you, Byron.
Okay. All right. So the motivational force formula, the expectancy theory is basically, first is, to the extent that I have belief as the person that's being asked to do something, if I believe that I have the capabilities, or if it's a team-based award, that the team has the capabilities, and then if it has a business type of multi-discipline, like finance and marketing and sales and operations, and all these departments have to work together, then I would be basically looking to the business plan to the extent that I believe that I'm capable of doing what's being asked, to the extent that I need to rely on a team, to the extent I believe the team's capable, and then to the extent that I believe in the business plan, then the higher that belief, the higher the motivational force begins with. And so you take this belief times the second category, which is to the extent that I trust the scorecard and the scorekeeper. If I trust that the scorecard is fair and that the expectations I believe I can hit, and I trust that the scorekeeper is going to accurately be able to keep score, then my motivational force will continue to be high. And then the final variable in this formula is the extent that I perceive the value of the award is worth the sacrifice that I'm going to have to make back here. If I perceive that value is high, then I'm going to have a very high motivational force. So we use the motivational force as a way to help make sure that whatever plan type is chosen here, that it actually has a chance of creating the outcome that the business owner is seeking. So one of the great ways that we can test this here is in your facilitated meetings with the leadership team. I'm guessing that there's a likelihood that there's a question being asked on a scale of 1 to 10. How confident are you that we're going to be able to actually deliver these results? And that would be a way to evaluate the belief in the team. So there are three contributors to this belief. And the first on that one is past performance. So past performance has been is not consistent with what's expected in the future, then it's very likely that the belief in the future outcome is going to be questioned. The second is, do we have the right resources in place for us to actually achieve this outcome? Those resources could be technology, equipment, relationships, team, and the ability for the team resources to be pulled together and applied to the job. And then the third is the capabilities that have been performed in the past of the other people. If people have performed exemplary in the past, followed through on their tasks, and had a high degree of reliability and are very conscientious, then it's likelihood that they're going to have a high degree of belief that they can actually make the change that's being asked on the organization in order for it to achieve whatever outcome you're seeking. So that would be on the belief side. Then on the trust and the scorecard, the first thing is that creates trust is that the agreement to reward and all of the measurements are in writing. So they're not a excited utterance. Hey, if we hit this target, I'll take everybody on a trip, or there's going to be a bonus paid. It's here's an actual agreement that says that if you hit this target, that you will then be rewarded in this manner, and that's all in writing. That's a best practice to make sure to create trust in the scorecard. Second is that it's whatever we're asking them to do, it's in their control, and that they feel like, okay, I can trust that I can control this process. I can see how this is going to work. I know what needs to happen here. And then, excuse me. The third is it can be measured. So quite often we'll see incentive plans that have quantitative and qualitative metrics. Quantitative metrics ideally would be very easy for the candidate to see their progress is being made all along throughout the incentive period, and then would know roughly that they're on track. The qualitative metrics that I see quite often are core value, core value, compliance, coaching or training, qualitative things. The qualitative components are very hard to measure. So in our recommendation is we would suggest that the weight that they have in the determination of the measurement is agreed upon between the two parties, the participant and the scorekeeper, so that there isn't any like judgment call at the end, like did they actually do what we said? It needs to be at least agreed to as to what the outcome looks like, either in effort or in some ideally personal experience. So that would be the best practices for getting high scores in the scorecard and the scorekeeper. And then best practices in perceived value. Here what we're really dealing with is life stage first. And life stage means maturity. What have I experienced today? Have I ever been a part of a company that went public? Have I seen a change of control where I got paid out in the past, or am I a novice to all this and I don't know necessarily what to expect in this, but I'm just happy to be a participant. So life stage tends to be represented in experiences that a person has, and the more experiences they have, the further down the road they are in their life stage. And then the second is their financial situation. Actually, financial and family situation. So quite often we have the question, people are asking the question, is it worth me to make the sacrifice in my time back here to get this award based upon my family situation? I got small children. I need to be available for my children. So there's going to be a real value judgment. The best practice in determining whether or not the award have perceived value is to do something really unusual. And that would be to ask the participant, what would be valuable to you, and have them contribute as much as they can to your understanding of whether or not they have a high motivational force. So we design all of our plans trying to figure out, do they have the necessary ingredients for a high level of belief? Do you have high trust in the scorecard and the scorekeeper? Here's where we find past promises made that weren't followed through on. So if there's been a promise in the past, oh, one day we're going to do a plan, and then that one day has not yet come, and then you decide you're going to just roll out something and say we're going to, and maybe it's not formally created, then don't expect them to believe, because we spend a fair amount of our time as consultants resolving unfulfilled past promises of we are going to do something for you that's rewarding. So this has a lot to do with, in the past, what has been going on. And then the perceived value in that we find the best practice is just to ask the people. We can use financial range targets, which I'm going to share with you in a minute, to determine whether or not they're going to perceive that award as being valuable. But ideally, you get a really high score. 10, 10, 10 would equal 1,000 here, and that would be the highest score. Then you would have a plan that you know darn well works. Okay, so we're thinking about this here. We're applying this to this triangle, which is, we're going to call this, we call this the triangle of resonance, meaning that ideally there would be a high level of resonance on the participant's part for these 3 points of this triangle. The first is on the triangle is the award that I'm getting meaningful? Do I feel like this award is actually meaningful to me? The second is, are you going to create substantial risk of forfeiture in this award for how long? And the further out the vesting schedule gets pushed from 3, 5, 7, or even 10 years, the lower you're going to get in the way of a perceived value of award, and you're going to have low trust. So it's going to be lower resonance. And then third, and this is by far, we've experienced this to be probably the most meaningful piece, is the payout. So when do I get paid whatever amount you've awarded to me back here? When do I get paid that? And so the payout is really about designing plans as a best practice that we are basically going to either pay you out at a fixed point in the future, like 5 or 7 years. If we don't have an exit strategy, if we're not operating under an exit strategy, we need to pick a point in the future where some of the value is available to be paid out. In order for it to have any motivational force at all, They need to see that that value can be used in their life. They can use it to educate their children. They can use it to improve their living conditions. They could take a trip. They could enhance their education. There's all sorts of life events that these people would like to use these funds for. And if that money's locked up until retirement, it has very little in the way of residence. You have to pick a future payout for a portion of the value.
Byron, we have another question.
Yep. Yes.
Natasha said, can you speak to tax treatment of RSUs versus stock options and how that might influence the payout and therefore which one you decide to implement?
Okay, so RSUs and stock options are going to be taxed the same way. The RSU, if it's an RSU, which is a restricted stock unit that turns into stock, then once that forfeiture period wears off, then the value of that RSU turns into ordinary income. So it's ordinary income W-2. Non-qualified stock option, when it is turned into, when it's exercised and the option holder recognizes then the value in the spread, which would be this, like down here, we got the $300,000 or the $600,000, that would all be taxed as W-2. So RSUs and stock options would be taxed as W-2 compensation. Restricted stock, then if you award restricted stock either through a sale or bonus, so let's say we bonus a key employee restricted stock, the bonus transaction, which is when the award occurs, like here, if we bonus this key employee $600,000, or let's say we bonused them 20% of that $600,000, they got 2% of the total 10% we allocated. That 120 grand would be W-2 comp when they received the stock or when the stock was vested. They could choose to elect to pay the tax now or pay the tax later, but either way it would be W-2. When the company was subsequently sold, then the restricted stockholder would get capital gain treatment on the gain. And so the advantage of restricted stock over options or SARs or Phantom is that at the sale of the company, the stock itself is a capital asset as opposed to a piece of compensation or ordinary income. Was that?
I think that covered it. I'm going to wait for her to confirm, but we also have another question that came in. It says, are there books or articles written on this topic that are a good reference?
Well, yes. If you're using Chat GPT, then you could go into Chat and ask Chat to give you an executive summary of phantom stock, restricted stock, stock appreciation rights, stock options. And I would recommend that you do a summary for each independently. And that way you have control and you can go in and read it and then have them ask Chat to further clarify various aspects of it by copying and pasting that aspect and ask for clarification. So we have a client, or new client in Canada, and I wasn't familiar with Canada's laws around equity-based incentives. So I went on Chat and asked Chat to teach me what are some of the rules for Canada. So I would say the best resource now would be, with the fastest way to get good information would be through AI by asking Chat. Now I have white papers on phantom stock, stock appreciation rights, restricted stock, comparisons of them that we can send you. I believe you're going to get our white paper on sharing value, which is an overall equity comp white paper. But that's what we have available for you. Did that answer that question?
I think it did. And also Natasha confirmed you answered her question as well.
Okay. So vesting and payout and award. So the best practice on the payout is to have some form of life event funding opportunity that's basically set in time in the future that would be far enough out that you would be able to accumulate value in the plan and then the amount that came out of the plan they could use to improve their life. The second is that if you have a change in control, that the payout then would be triggered. Now, here's the key for the business owners, that if you have a payout at change of control, make sure that the payout language says that the language mirrors exactly how you get paid. So if you get, say, 70% of the business value in, let's say, cash, and 30% in some form of performance terms, or some form of earnout or time delayed payments, then the equity participants would get 70% cash and 30% paid, consistent with you.
We had another question pop up. Sorry to
Yep.
keep interrupting you.
No, not at
good
all.
with this?
I'm grateful. Otherwise, I kind of wondered if I'm just talking to myself. So
Okay, so we have a question that says, how much should a company allocate as a percentage of NOI for short-term incentives, like a bonus, and how much as percentage of NOI for long-term incentives like SARS and Phantom, et cetera?
So there is no hard and fast formula. It's based upon needs for cash and use of cash, one. And then what's the configuration of your staff? If you've got a staff pool that's made up of wage earners that are, let's say, earning under 120 grand, chances are they're going to be very reliant on that short-term bonus in order for them to maintain their standard of living. So it's really becomes very subjective. Normally, the long-term incentives are isolated to the top 15 or 20% of payroll. So we don't see broad-based long-term incentives in very many companies. So if you took your total payroll and for long-term incentives, what I was going to get at here is the best practice would be, if your goal is retention, then you would be, in order for it to be considered a perceived value award, you would take 15% of the salary of the participants and say, roughly, that would be considered a meaningful award for a long-term incentive, like a restricted or stock option or SAR that would come out of this pool that would meet this motivational force for them to stay. So that's how I would calculate the amount to be allocated towards the long term. The short term is going to be based upon your sources or uses of cash and the needs of the staff in order for you to get what you want in the way of output, and where you might sit in terms of the spectrum of quartiles of compensation. If you're high in salary, then what you're saying is, we're a utility. We're not looking for you to do anything different. We just need you to show up. Chances are your variable bonuses are very low. So apologize for not being able to answer that one with a actual specific example, but it's situational.
Okay, and then we had one question pop up. It says, feel free to answer at the right time, which might be once you're done. I am interested to understand how an ESOP relates to this, or Byron's thought on an ESOP versus this.
So an ESOP is an employee stock ownership plan, ESOP. And an ESOP would be first of all, it's an exit strategy that allows the business owner to sell their company to their broad-based employees using the retirement plan tax code, which means that the purchase of the stock becomes a deduction for the company, which allows the company then to take a tax deduction for making principal payments on whatever loan that it had to buy the stock. So we typically see ESOPs as an exit strategy, as opposed to an incentive plan for employees. ESOPs do work as incentives. They require, though, that the leadership invest meaningful amounts of time and probably fortune in teaching the employees how their efforts directly contribute to company value, and then teach them how the ESOP works. So the best resource for ESOP understanding is The Great Game of Business. And there's a book written by Jack Stack. It's called Open Book Management, which was their best practices for running their company, which was an ESOP. And it's a great story. It's very useful, whether or not you're an ESOP company or not. But if you're running an open book, it's very helpful. So an ESOP would be more of an exit as opposed to a purely incentive plan. Did that answer that questioner's
I
question?
think so. Yep. Greg said great.
Okay. All right. Great. So then on the award, I said the best practice would be 15% of the salary to satisfy this perceived value of the award. Another best practice is that at some point in the future, 3 or 4 or 5 years, there's roughly 60% of the participants' salary that is subject to forfeiture. And that represents this moat around that key employee, because if they're making say 150 grand and they got $90,000 in the plan that is subject to forfeiture, your relationship is a little on the rocks, but they haven't lost total faith yet. Recruiter calls, asks them if they're interested. They start talking a little bit, talk about money, ask about what do they have in the way of value that I could get coming into the plan. And they go, well, I've got $90,000 to lose, to walk away from. I'm not that mad at my employer. So you're trying to build a moat. And we know that 60% of salary roughly is a target for senior leadership. Over the course of, say, 3, if they're really, really effective, 5, not so much, is subject to forfeiture. That would be a best practice on the payout or on the award. And then on the payout, finally, is if they should die or become disabled, you want to be able to answer the question affirmatively. Yes, your family is going to get paid out. We see that this really helps solidify the relationship at the home front. So, being able to say to the spouse, if something happens to me, this plan is going to pay out, and we'll still receive those funds. So we're not heartless business owners. On the vesting, what we got over here is we've got 2 best practices. We got target, or let's call it performance, and then we got time. And so in a performance-based one, if we said that we're gonna compare performance to a time base, let's say we invested 33% a year. So over the 3 years, the person was 100% invested in the plan. You say, well, how does that compare to a performance base? What we can do is we set the target, and then we have a range of outcomes. And let's just say that in the first year that this person does 110% of what was expected of them at the target. Well, we multiply 33 times 110. So now they would be 36% vested in the first year. And then if next year they did 150% of target times 33, that would be 49 plus 36 is 85% vested. So then all they'd have to do is basically hit another 15% to be 100% vested down here. The reason I show you this is that we like performance-based vesting for achievement-oriented individuals who have a high level of motivation, and there's a lot of clarity as to what the company's capable of. They trust you and your scoring ability. They're going to have a high level perceived value in a performance-based vesting as opposed to a time-based vesting. So we like to use the performance-based vesting as a best practice in our incentive plans. So in the next 2 minutes, I'm going to close with this. WIIFY, Wi-Fi is what's in it for you. And basically, this here is a representation of the roles that a business owner plays. And most business owners we work with, they're playing multiple roles. But we know that in order for you to increase your transferable value, to increase your T over here, that you need to step down from these roles and get down to a role or two that is you just love doing and don't want to give up. But along the way, while you are delegating that role, you're able to watch a scorecard of the people that you're delegating to, or actually offboarding to. If you haven't heard of Michelle Hecken's offboarding book, you might want to read that. But it's the difference between offboarding and delegating is meaningful. But ideally, we want to get the business owner going down, playing fewer roles so that they increase their T value, because this over here is the reliance, and this here is the C at C, which is cash at closing, at sale. So if you sold your business, ideally a high level of cash would come to you at closing. Well, we know that if we're really relying on you, that the cash at closing is down here is low. But if we're not relying on you, if we're relying on you and relying on management, then the cash at closing is high. So what's the relevance of this to all of this? You would make transferring some of your responsibilities part of either the vesting schedule here or the award amount here. Those would be the only two that we can move around. We can't accelerate the payout. It's got to be embedded in the plan as a certain amount of time. So we just work with the things we can move. We can increase or decrease the award. We can accelerate or decelerate the vesting schedule. But as you're able to delegate those responsibilities, move down and have less and be able to meet the expectations of the buyer that this business has transferable value, then we get higher cash at closing. So started out talking about the three fronts: self-employment, a lot of self-employment, 5 million new businesses a year, 150,000 baby boomers are selling their companies every year. The Deloitte study has 40% of surveyed employees have side hustles. That's a lot of interest in self-employment. So we can't take that for granted. We talked about how you can use your business's value to build a moat around the people that you want to keep. You set up a pool of equity, and then you choose between full value or growth in value. And then you can decide which of these, what's my relationship with these people. And then we decide on how do we feel about the award schedule and the vesting schedule and the payout based on the motivational force. And your payoff is you grow your business value. Ideally, you'd have more time freedom. So I think, yeah, it's 10:51. That's inside of 50 minutes.
Perfect. Okay, we have a few questions. First, there's a lot of people that want to go back and watch this again. So I want to let you guys know there will be a recording come out in the next 24 hours. I'll also ask Byron to take some close-up pictures of the whiteboard so we can include some of those in there. So all your questions about that, yes, you will get more detailed shots. We have a question that says, can you clarify the 15% of salary best practice? Do you mean that we should start with 15% of that person's current salary as the starting point for long-term incentive? Or were you meaning that the top 15% of the company's payroll should be in long-term incentive plans?
Yes. Okay. That's a great clarification question. This 15% would be a function of their salary. So if our goal is to retain them, and we're trying to build this moat around them to keep them from thinking about becoming self-employed or responding to a recruiter's call, then our recommendation, best practice, is that you would put at least 15% of their salary into that long-term award. It just so happens that the people that can participate in those long-term plans are your top 15% of your payroll. So there's some cross utilization of the 15%, but the 15% I was referring to was 15% of salary as an award to help build that moat around them. If your objective is motivation, then it's going to be variable. It should be based upon performance. And the 15 might be the midpoint. You may end up at 25 or 30% depending upon performance.
Awesome. Okay, guys, do we have any more questions? We have a couple minutes. Anyone wants to ask anything before we head out? I'm going to go ahead and start to close us out. Thanks so much for attending. You guys will receive that recap within 24 hours. That will include the resources mentioned, the recording, and some closer shots of the board. Someone asked, what is the offboarding book? I cannot find it.
Michelle Hecken. M-I-C-H-E-L-E Hecken, H-E-C-K-E-N.
H-E-C-K-E-N. Perfect. Michelle Hecken. All right. Good deal. Be sure, if you enjoyed this one, to check out the other upcoming events we have at petracoach.com and click the little events tab to see all of our other upcoming workshops and webinars. And you can also view some of the previous ones there. As always, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out at info@petracoach.com. Byron, thank you so much for being here, and we will get that recap out later today. Oh, we have one more, sorry. Do you provide consulting to set up a plan?
Yes, that's our business, is to work with business owners to design and implement and monitor the performance of equity-based incentives. So you can find me at the McFarland Group, McFarland, MCFARLAND.com, or you can find me on LinkedIn at Byron K. McFarland at LinkedIn.
And I'll make sure I include those links in the recap as well, so you guys can get in touch if needed. All right, thank you guys so much for being with us today, and have a great rest of your Thursday.